So movies, books, and just about every modern political conversation includes the word transformation. We often talk about transformative leaders, events that have transformed our lives. But what in the world does it mean when we say transformation? We all have a sort of general understanding of what it means, sort of like a known, felt understanding of what it means. But until about the 1970s, we really didn't have a collective understanding through a theoretical perspective of what it means. So these videos are really going to get into explaining just exactly what this thing called transformative learning is. And it's important to begin by noting the seminal author of transformative learning theory, whose name is Jack Mezirow. Jack Mezirow earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree at the University of Minnesota in sociology and education, but then later went to UCLA, where he studied more of adult learning. And during his time there, he and his wife, Edie, went through a sort of transformation of their own. Edie decided to go back to work and actually enter the workforce. And this was a really sort of surprising thing given the time. And also, you think about society at that point in time, and this was sort of a phenomenon that was going on. Women were going to work. They decided to go back to school. They decided to further their careers in education. So here's how Mezirow and a number of authors who we include in the credits section of this video have described transformative learning theory. It's probably best to begin with a very simple description. So let's take a look at you. Just think about yourself, right? So here you are. Oh, maybe you're happy. Let's make you happy, right? This is a great piece of artistry right here. Now, this is you at a particular point in time, but you didn't just appear at this point in time. You've had a series of experiences that brought you to this point. And if you think back, you probably remember the experiences that were most enjoyable, the most jarring, dilemmas that you've faced. We can't remember all of them. There's only a few people who can actually do that. So when you do this, you've gone through the series of experiences. Let's just write experience over here as a reference point. You view reality in a specific way based off of all of the assumptions you built over time. Now, you exist in a world where there are other people, right? It'd be kind of weird if you didn't exist in a world of other people, but let's draw some stick figures over here and consider how they had their own experiences, right, that led them to this moment in time. And if you subscribe to the fact that experience yields an understanding of the world through what we might call assumptions or beliefs or values, the implication here is that there's multiple realities happening in any sort of given situation. There's a reality for you, there's a reality for me, and there's a reality for someone else. And sometimes there's only small differences in those realities. Sometimes there are drastic differences in those realities. And the reason why this is so important to transformative learning theory is that sometimes those realities, when they clash, the way that we make sense of the world, we enter conflict. That's my little symbol for conflict. And conflict can be healthy and it can be unhealthy. And there's plenty of text about conflict and its use in the workplace and in life. But it can also be a place, if the dialogue is open and reflective, to discover new things about yourself and others and have some insights that really help you along the way and in your work. Now, the problem is that, in everyday life, what actually happens is we sort of go through life sleepwalking. So this is my little eyes representing sleep. We're not fully awake. William James once said that compared to what we ought to be, we're only half awake. And if you think about the last time you drove to work, actually remembering what it was like driving to work, You think back and you think, well, how in the world did I get here? Because we're so entranced, so in our own minds, that it's very difficult to stay with reality as it plays out in the present moment. Another example of this is if you're introduced to somebody and you forget their name just as soon as you've been introduced. Don't worry, it happens to most of us. And this is really a symptom of a world that we live in that's full of distraction. So the first key ingredient for transformative learning is awareness. Now, what can happen as you walk along your path is you can experience something called a disorienting dilemma. Okay? Disorienting dilemma is something that occurs in your life that no matter what expertise you build up, no matter how many experiences you've had and how much wisdom you believe you have, well, you know what happens is your assumptions really can't help paint a full, inclusive, healthy, and comfortable understanding of what's going on. So a few examples are personal crises that you might face, life's transitions, organizational change, being fired or promoted. And let's just use a few examples. You have a baby, your house burns down, you win the lottery, you look at a piece of art that really inspires you, or you simply are meditating and you have this sort of creative spark or insight that comes to you. Whatever the disorientation is, it causes you to actually look at and re-examine your beliefs, your values, your assumptions, and all of the things that you've been sort of building through these experiences you've had throughout life. So following a disorienting dilemma, if you look at the way that adult learning theory sort of encapsulates all of this, adults go through a series of steps towards transformative learning. The first is critically reflecting on the transformation that occurred for you. Okay? And this can include realizing that a lot of the things that we've learned about ourselves and what we should do and shouldn't do come from authority figures. And they aren't necessarily helpful in all regards. So critical reflection is looking specifically, sort of sitting like Rodin's thinker, and thinking specifically about, are my assumptions really working for me? Right? So you're sort of in your head with critical reflection. But the beauty of working with other people is that because they have different experiences over time, they've collected really some divergent viewpoints about the world. And it's always helpful to talk to other people as long as the dialogue is free and full. So the next step, according to the theory, is called reflective discourse, but let's just call it dialogue for now. And a dialogue that doesn't mean I'm just telling you about my viewpoints and you're sharing your viewpoints, but a dialogue that allows for changing the other and also being changed yourself. And we'll talk about a little bit later in the next video the types of things that are necessary for dialogue to be healthy and transformative. The next step after dialogue is revising, going back and revising your assumptions about the world so that they're more inclusive, whole, and healthy. And after you've revised those assumptions, you come up with a new outlook on life. And of course, the next step is healthier, more well-informed behaviors. And of course, when you look at this entire process, and you look at it through the flow of time, what you're doing is you're going from one experience to another experience to another experience, and you're carrying your assumptions. And if you're really practicing this thing called transformative learning, you're revising, even if just slightly, the way that you interact with the world, experience by experience. And there are two main ways that you can do this. One is through instrumental learning, and the other is through communicative learning. And oftentimes when we do critical reflection, we're actually sort of thinking about our experience and testing the validity of that experience based on our past and the things we've run into in the past. Communicative, however, is including those divergent perspectives through dialogue and remaining open to them so that we can actually fully become more of an integrated human being. Those are the two different ways. And there are many other ways if you look at the critiques on transformative learning. To put it simply, there are two ways that you could transform your life, right? So there's the objective dimensions of transformative learning theory, which we might say is transformative learning with a lowercase t. And there's the subjective dimensions of transformative learning, which we might call a capital T. The lowercase t transformation is a change in the way we go about our everyday life, the things that we actually do, the procedures we use, actually changing the way that we behave, okay? And that occurs pretty regularly. Some behavioral change is more pronounced than other behavioral change. But if we look at the transformative learning with the uppercase T, we're talking about a change in the very way we understand ourselves, our identity, our roles, who we are as a person, and where we're going. So we hope you understand that transformative learning theory is complex, but if you look at it from the bird's eye view, you've got the disorienting dilemma, critical reflection, followed by dialogue, a new outlook, and behaviors. It's not transformation unless you have a new outlook that manifests in new behaviors in your interaction with the world.